Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another amazing episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Diana Zhng. Diana is the CEO and co-founder of NeighborShare, a rapidly growing giving approach that empowers our communities, frontline heroes to help families through critical moments of need of 400 or less. If this is your first time joining us, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, hit like on this video, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any episodes. On today's podcast, Diana shares growth tips, tools, and great, amazing advice that will help you whether you are starting a nonprofit or for-profit organization. She also shares amazing tips on how to get amazing volunteers to help you push your mission in changing the world. Please help me welcome Diana with managing and growing your nonprofit. This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
First and foremost, I'm a mom, so shout out to my 4-year-old Lily and my 2-year-old Teddy. In my normal day job, as I like to describe it, I'm actually a 15-year executive at a global hedge fund out here in Connecticut, having run various parts of our organization, everywhere from our investment research department to our corporate real estate to our firm's talent programs. Wow. And these days, however, I've actually been on a bit of a new path where I'm doing something completely different. I'm today the co-founder and CEO of NeighborShare, startup nonprofit with mission to really empower our community's frontline heroes to help families through moments of pivotal need. So I'm a first-generation immigrant. I was originally born in China, and I moved here with my family when I was 5. And, background-wise, I was thinking about this coming into the podcast. I moved around a lot. I think I need to do a recount at some point, but I'm pretty sure I moved around at least 8 times between the years of kindergarten and high school, and all throughout sort of like the New England type of area. And and I think with that, I learned a lot of just different perspective and went through just different challenges growing up that I think has helped shape a lot of who I am and probably drive some of the values behind sort of what's driven me to be building NeighborShare today.
Listen, you say you moved around 8 times, at least 8 times. I mean, that's shifting schools and culture. What was that like?
It basically sucked, if I were being honest. Growing up as the relatively shy kid who wasn't that comfortable walking into a room of new people, to your point, it was very destabilizing in a certain way, right? Where I didn't necessarily have the ongoing base of friends in my childhood, and so in a lot of ways, I do think that's shaped sort of who I am and probably helped me also get over certain challenges in terms of shyness and what it means to have to walk into a room and just make some new friends, right? And so in those ways, I also appreciate it because from tough times, you also learn great lessons. And, and then since then, I've also been grateful to have been able to then build my sort of like my platform of friends, from college and onwards and things like that.
For example, we just met on the call, your personality and your confidence, just like I knew you already. It was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I actually give a lot of credit to that, to actually my experiences with NeighborShare. It's a startup nonprofit that grew during the time of COVID. And then to your point, for us to build a platform the way that we're envisioning, I've had to meet a lot of new people, and network into different things. And the thing that's been great is because of the nature of our mission, which is like, we're just here to help each other out and help a neighbor. It's been by default, I get to just meet really wonderful people with wonderful values. And it's sort of become less and less scary through time because it's like every time I meet someone wonderful like you, it's like, oh, like we're just so aligned. It's easy. Like, it's sort of like, it's sort of like you just jive right away because there's just sort of like underlying trust and shared values type of thing. And so I think via that and just by doing lots of reps, I think I just gained that confidence largely because of the nature of mission and project I'm on, which has been really great.
Wow, that is so amazing. So let's do this. Let's talk about NeighborShare. What inspired you to begin this journey and why?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a couple of different things. One, I'd love to just tell you a bit more about what NeighborShare even is and what we're trying to do. And then, yes, let's talk about the inspiration because there are many pieces to it. So, as I quickly mentioned before, NeighborShare is a nonprofit with really a mission to empower what we call our community's frontline heroes with a new resource to help families through pivotal moments of need. And by community's frontline heroes, we really mean the folks who are already so deeply embedded in their communities and have the true pulse on their communities, right? So these are the case managers and social workers at nonprofits. These are the teachers at schools. These are the folks who are experts, right? Like they walk with our communities, they have the pulse on need, and they know when needs are being met. And then most importantly, they know when needs are falling through the cracks, right? And so we really wanted to build a model that empowered those wonderful people who are already doing such hard work to help various neighbors go through hard moments and giving them something extra, right? Like the analogy we use is like, we want to be the bat phone that they can call when your client just needs a little bit of help.
Right.
And then in terms of what inspired the journey, I think it was sort of a few different things. I think there were some meta themes, even in terms of, we were just talking about my background and how I grew up. And, my family and I, we've definitely gone through periods of need, right? Like I definitely was that kid. I remember very vividly, I was that kid in, elementary school in the lunch line trying to hide my reduced price lunch ticket. Like I sort of, I viscerally still remember what it feels like to be in need in that way. And sometimes by the feeling shame that I was in need in that way. And so I think in a lot of ways, and in terms of how I've been shaped in my adulthood, there's sort of always been this fundamental desire to figure out, how do I make impact in my community? How do I give back? And then on NeighborShare itself, what literally happened there was, my co-founder, actually, this wonderful man named Brian Kreider, he actually called me kind of out of the blue, early last year when the pandemic was just hitting, and he had sort of like the original outline of the NeighborShare concept. And the reason why I was so inspired to kind of jump in feet first, sort of like in addition to the background I had, was also just of the moment and so timely and critical, right? Sort of like, we as a country are already carrying around this statistic that 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. That's already ridiculous, right? That means sort of like it takes very little to sort of get you to spiral into a crisis. And that, by the way, was a Federal Reserve statistic that was published before the pandemic. And so then what happened is Brian and I, we're sent home to work from home. We're saying, hopeful things to each other, like we'll see each other in May, like it's April now, like it should pass by soon.
Right.
And at the same time, you're reading all these headlines about how quickly our communities are basically falling apart, like the immediate impact of the lockdown, right? And the immediate impact of what it meant to miss one paycheck, right? And so when he called up with that original concept, I was like, yes, like if this is a way that we can figure out to really build out and scale out and make real long-lasting impact now that this avalanche of need has been set off, I'm in. Like it was like a 30-minute call. That's all it took to convince me, and I've just jumped in feet first. And then I would say the other part was the concept itself, right? Like the problem that we are really setting out to solve is how can we get direct aid, direct services, right, to the people in our neighborhoods who need it the most. And so the thought of doing that via this layer of experts, right, these frontline heroes, our case managers, our social workers, the people who have already been working tirelessly to help our communities, it just clicked for me in a way that really made sense. And so, my life this past year has been really figuring out how do we get these puzzle pieces to fit so that this whole thing can really sing, right?
Wow. So let's talk about this. So how does it work?
Yeah. So what I think of NeighborShare as is like, we're a tech platform. Think of us as that, right? And then what we do is we bring on really awesome nonprofits from all over the country. They're all sort of organizations that provide direct services in one way or another to our community. So they have that direct contact with individuals in our communities, right? And so we literally have anything from, after school education programs to domestic abuse centers, homeless shelters, what have you. We cover all gamuts of life. And, we onboard these partner organizations. And once they're onboarded, their staff members are able to then post just needs that they're seeing every day via their communities, right? And these are all pivotal needs where, they're $400 or less, where a relatively small amount of money can make really just truly pivotal, critical impact for somebody, right? And we actually leave our guidelines pretty broad because at the end of the day, we're really a tool and a resource to empower, once again, the experts, right? So we are also really careful to not come up with just a bunch of red tape and rules and we cover this need and not that need versus, hey, we're giving you the broad strokes and then you help us figure out how to apply so that then you can submit these validated needs on the platform. And then once we get donor money via the platform, we get that money directly back out to our frontline heroes so they can ultimately distribute those funds directly to our neighbors in need.
Wow, this is crazy. I'm really trying to hold my composure right now. I started a nonprofit organization called Meet the Streets, and what we do, we feed the community. Actually, we feed the community right now. We feed 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We started out feeding on Wednesday. And, the only thing that's kind of holding us back is the funding. So we started feeding Wednesday. Everything is privately funded. We started out feeding the community every Wednesday. Then we started Wednesday and Friday. Then the beginning of August, we started Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we really, actually, my wife and I had this conversation about how to expand that and really getting into, feeding every day of the week. And this is near the downtown area in Houston. We're feeding community. One of these things for us is like we're doing it, and we have the heart to help people, but a lot of things like the funding, I mean, we have everything organized or whatever, but there's a lot of things we don't know. And sometimes we find ourselves stuck, trying to figure out what's what. What has it been like, working with all these nonprofit organization partners across the world, and what has been the feedback?
Yeah. I would say that it's overall been a really heartwarming, inspiring, and in many ways humbling type of experience. I'm new to the game, right? And we're coming to these organizations that have been established, and and they're oftentimes the smaller organizations, right? Like the small grassroots hyperlocal organizations, because what we've discovered is that those are truly the ones that once again have that direct pulse on the community, right? And to just learn about all the really wonderful work that they're doing, the challenges that they're going through, the struggles, right? Like to your point, it's both the helping the neighbors, and the organizations themselves oftentimes also need some help in whatever it is, right? That's been just in a lot of ways, been sort of like the inspiration and the energy behind the work that I do, right? Of the like, right, how do we really partner with these folks to make them even more impactful, because they're already doing so much with so little.
Oh.
And at the same time, I would say it's been humbling as well, because it's interesting. Like, my team and I, we're coming in with the sole intention of helping the community, right? But I think it's like really important for us to recognize that the way in which we're wanting to provide this help is actually, fundamentally quite disruptive to the traditional nonprofit model, right? Where, like nonprofits, typically they're set up to like you essentially fundraise, and then you spend that money to run your essential programs. And then that's how you provide your awesome impact to the community. And what we're asking our partners more to do is act as a conduit for resources to pass directly, right? So you help us identify the individual in need. We get the money to you, and then we're asking you to get that money back to the individual, right? So it's not really to fund your central programming or whatever else. It's help with a direct need in that direct way. And it's been humbling because it's sort of like been a combination of like the feedback being really largely positive, right? Like getting really strong affirmation of, geez, the type of hole we're trying to fill in our safety net in the neighborhoods, like there are definitely lots of holes in there, right? This definitely helped. And then at the same time, I think I've learned to be just a lot more empathetic and sort of like open-minded to really understanding the challenges that our partners face, to understand that our solution isn't a one-size-fits-all, and that there's like a lot of really great feedback and thought partnership in terms of the, hey, how do we make sure we continue building and evolving our model in a way that really best serves the folks that we're trying to serve? So it's been, just, I would say, really rich experiences and back and forths all around. And then just once again, with just really kind-hearted and just inspirational characters who are doing and going through the challenges they're going to because they care, which has been wonderful.
Oh, wow, wow. Awesome. What are some of the biggest lessons and experiences that you have learned so far?
Yeah, I had, I think the couple that come to mind relate to me being sort of like a first-time founder of a startup, first time in a nonprofit, lots of firsts for me. And I think first is just like learning how to be fearless, right? Like I'm someone who has had to actually work on my self-confidence quite a bit over the years. I know I might not come out this way, like, hey, you sound confident, you sound whatever, but like, trust me, there's a lot inside that I'm managing through. And I don't know if this is because, I'm now working on a mission that's very much about advocating on behalf of others, like it's for our communities, for others, but like, I've certainly come to find through the experience that, that like kind of trite adage of like, the answer is automatically no if you don't ask. Like that's definitely true, right? So working up the courage time and time again to just like go through like the act of asking, of pitching the NeighborShare idea, of just getting ourselves out there, right? And getting a lot more yeses than you might expect, right? And so there's like a part of the like, just like learning how to be courageous and pushing your vision out there, right? That's been like really valuable and something I'd want to carry on with me. And I think the other big lesson that I've like really fundamentally carried with me, once again, as a first-time founder really is like learning to like really embrace and almost savor like not knowing what the right answer is. Yeah. Right? Sort of like in the worst moments that can get really stressful, right? Almost paralyzing because you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to go build this thing. What's the right next move and whatever. But in the best version of the situation, like what I've come to find is that it should actually be very freeing right? This knowledge that, like, by the way, no one knows what the right answer is, right? It's
Absolutely.
not like, hey, I'm doing this test and I don't know the answer. I'm going to fail this test. But like, no, it's like no one knows what the right answer is. So this freedom to just like let yourself get creative and experiment and just go try things and fail fast. I think that's like a thing that I'm also trying to carry with me as I, work through the challenges that might come up and whatever else as we work to build out this mission.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. I'm listening to you and you talking about the confidence. And it's something about purpose. Purpose, I mean, it really it kills a lot of you find yourself in a situation you're not even thinking about where you are. Sometimes you're having those flashbacks like, how in the world did I get here? For example, you say you're also a mother. It's something I've heard and I've just shared with you. So let's say you're walking across a 100-story building, right? And let's say there's a ladder right across the top of the building. Somebody say, I would give you $1 million to walk across, and you got to walk 20 feet. Would you do it?
No, that sounds really scary. Right.
So basically, no money will probably make you do this. Would you do it for your daughter?
I mean, yes, right?
Now,
Like if it's
absolutely.
right.
That's the point. That's the point. That purpose, you would do things that you would never imagine yourself doing it. Because you say you started in the beginning of COVID, started really pushing this mission and, growing fast. And a lot of times growth, there's growing pains. What has been the biggest challenges that you've ran into building NeighborShare so far?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are a lot of challenges, but a couple that's key ones that certainly come to mind. The first one is actually the thing I mentioned before, where look, we set out to build this new resource for the nonprofit community out there, and so step one has actually really been figuring out how do we actually become accepted by the nonprofit community, right? Because like once again, the thing we're doing is there to act as a supplement and to support, but it's at the same time fundamentally disruptive to how most operate and thought through their organization models, and so that's actually been sort of like I would almost say like a much bigger challenge than we anticipated going in, because we're going and be like, hey, like this should be a no-brainer, right? Like really easy. We're trying to get money into your hands in ways that you didn't before. And instead it's been much more challenging, because it's like, beyond just things like, hey, what should our process be and how do we make it really easy and efficient? It's also, I've come to sort of much more deeply appreciate the role of also like trust and relationships, right? And community, like these nonprofits saying, but who are you? Like, who is NeighborShare? Are you guys a scam? Why should we trust you? Why should we believe this? Why should we believe that you're not just like another team that just like wants to do something great, but won't ditch us, like a little bit later, like because we've been burned before, right? Like really understanding those angles. And so I think that's been a big piece of it, right? Like coming into this new space and working to be that new player and sort of like how do you build traction, right? When you don't have the track record yet, you just have this beauty of the idea and the vision and the purity of your purpose, right? And your intention. So that's been really interesting. The other one that's been interesting is the like thinking through like how do I continue to build and motivate like a largely volunteer team. Right. So, like one of the aspects of NeighborShare that I'm really proud of is that, all our progress, all these things that you see, like our website, our blog, all these things, like, it's like almost 100% powered by volunteer passion and energy. And it's something that's like probably like, beyond the fact that we're literally helping people day to day, that's probably the other aspect of the organization that I'm the most proud of, where, once again, we're an organization born out of COVID, right? So I have a team of 30 or so volunteers across the country working remotely. I haven't even met a bunch of them, and we're building basically a startup together. And so that's been both really wonderful, but as you can imagine, also challenging, right? Like how do you manage through that when you don't have one of the most obvious motivators that most leaders have, which is, hey, like I write your paycheck, right? So we don't have that. It's really all about just the value and of our mission, and then also sort of like what type of experience we can offer. So that's been an interesting angle for me as I've learned to sort of adjust and learn lessons from my previous experiences as a for-profit executive and then applying it into this volunteer space.
Well, that is huge, Diana. 30 some odd volunteers. So you have what type of vision? What are you doing, or what do you feel is the force behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a combination of a few things, right? There's the one, which is, I think, as a leader, like this constant re-emphasis of and management of just vision and purpose, right? Like, let's all remember why we are doing this.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of like we have, just like really just, I mean, oftentimes like just heartbreaking needs that continue to flow through our platform. And so just making sure we're all just connected to like fundamentally at the end of the day, why are we all working nights and weekends and stressing out over this? Like, that's why, right? Like we're helping that single mom, we're helping that kid move on with his life and get out of gang life, whatever it is. Right. So there's that. And then I think there's the other piece, which is the like paying attention to sort of how do you also just create, beyond just the mission itself, just like a really rewarding developmental experience for our volunteers, right? Like all of these are folks who are bringing in a certain set of expertise from their day jobs into now building, NeighborShare as their sort of like their volunteer gig, and giving them just awesome opportunities and freedom to shape and create, right? Because like this is not just their social impact sort of project, it's also their startup project, right? Where once again, like we have the freedom of knowing that like, well, we don't know what the right answer is yet. So like come in with your ideas and help us shape, right? And so I think there's like a key part of this thing where like it's all about unlocking each other's sense of ownership, right? Like where you're not coming in as like a lowercase e employee, you're coming in with a capital O owner, right? Sort of like this notion of like, without you, we don't exist, right? And so I think when you give people that level of purpose and ownership and like, hey, that criticality of role, I think that really matters. And I think that's true, by the way, of both the volunteer thing that we're doing and the nonprofit we're building, but also for profits as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you round up this amazing team of people?
Yeah. So like it was literally a combination of friends around me. So that started first, right? Like, like literally sort of like what's the short list I would call. And then from there, we've literally done everything from finding, a couple of like recruiting firms who are willing to like post a couple pro bono job posts for us because we're like, we can't pay you. Like we can't even pay the person we're recruiting for. So like getting a couple of favors that way, posting on like there's a lot of just really wonderful forums and things out there. Like I just recently discovered one. I kind of just lost the name of it, but there was one where it's sort of like you can post to see if you can get freelance graphic designers who are interested in taking on projects for social good and things like that. There's a lot of cool resources out there. So like it's a lot of just hustling to figure out how we go find the right types of expertise. And then the thing that I've come to appreciate is like, then once we sort of like got to sort of like sufficient size, then it's like the network begets network, right? So every volunteer brings in their own network of friends. And so it's like during team meetings, I'm oftentimes like, hey, we need someone to do this. Who knows a friend who can do that, right? And so like kind of like compounds, and it's like this cool sort of like branching of trees that happens through the NeighborShare like now we have a NeighborShare network, right, of volunteers who can sort of like pull in when we need some help and stuff like that. So that's been really great.
I love that. I love that. I don't want the Lead to Greatness audience to miss that. You basically you open your mouth and you ask, and I really love that. That is a knowledge bomb for a lot of us, and even man, you said something recruiting force. Someone reaching out to these organizations. We never thought about that at first. So, I mean, I wrote this down for myself.
Yeah, great.
That we're going to do. So I know the Lead to Greatness audience is definitely going to be better just for that tip
That's great.
alone. This is amazing. Myself included, as a founder of a nonprofit organization or a profit organization, what advice could you give to us first-time founders, who's seeking to have more impact, social on the community?
Yeah. So for first-time founders, and it's interesting because I'm going through my journey myself. These are also lessons I repeat to myself, by the way. So it's like helpful to get to say it out loud. I think first, like, look, like it's gonna be hard, and at times really lonely, right? Like I've definitely felt that a lot, in trying to build this thing. But it's like keep going, right? Keep believing and trusting in your vision. Keep believing in sort of like the power of your energy and your motivation and the team around you and the feedback around you. Just keep going. So there's that. I think there's another piece that I've been saying to myself a lot too, where it's sort of like, at the same time, be kind and give yourself grace. Like I've gone through a lot of interesting self-reflections. I found that I'm like my own worst boss in a lot of ways, right? Like, when I run teams and things like that, I'm always like, very focused on like how do we manage expectations and work-life balance and just making sure that people are just, well situated with the right perspective. But then in my own setting where like I'm my own boss, it's sort of like, it's this constant sort of like things are going fast enough. And how do you, work hard and do these things versus like what I keep on reminding myself now is like, learn the patience of it. Right? Like sometimes you just have to, like I actually got this great piece of advice from someone I met recently. Sometimes you just need to give time. And that's okay. Right? And that's okay. Like sometimes an idea needs to marinate or you need to give it time to blossom, to really implement and go. And that's okay to be patient sometimes, even though it's sort of like, I'm always up like, I feel this urgency. We need to go help more people. How do we keep on going? Right? So that's another piece. Like give yourself grace, right? And like, you're doing a really hard thing and you're brave for doing it. So like, embrace that. And then the last piece that, I've certainly been very grateful of in my own experience is sort of like, really invest in surrounding yourself with the right mentors and advisors, right, for you and the business that you're trying to build. I'm just incredibly grateful for the really awesome people on the NeighborShare board, our advisory council, because those are experts I can pull in, right? Like, once again, like I'm building this business for the first time. I'm in this new industry for the first time. Like there's like so many firsts. There's so many things I don't know how to do. And to have sort of your short list of folks who are in it with you, who believe in the vision, who believe in you, and who also have just experience and expertise and answers sometimes that you don't have in yourself, that helps to make it certainly less hard and less lonely. So it's definitely worth investing in if you're able to. And then, so that's sort of like, those were my thoughts for like the first time founders. And then for those seeking to have more social impact in their communities, I think my key thing is just go do it. Like do something, right? Like making social impact doesn't mean like, me like take a period out of my normal career and go build a new no, like just like go volunteer in an existing one, like help a neighbor today. Like it's sort of like, it could be mini steps, but you can make impact today. Right. And I feel like I actually went through years in my early career where I went through like, oh, I'm busy, but I kind of want to make social impact, but what should I do? Like, I just like overthought it too much. Right. Versus like take on what you can, celebrate that. And then maybe over time you can do more, but just get into it. Like no excuses, like just do it. But like it can keep it small. It doesn't need to be this big, overwhelming jump. Like I need to go start something new and whatever it is. Like just help a neighbor today, right? It can be as simple as that. And by the way, shout out, you can also do that on nbshare.org. You can help someone today if you wanted to, right? Just like little micro changes, right? Like, and that's all you need to do.
That's awesome. I love the one really hit my heart was give yourself grace. And you talked about the time, and it just kind of, I'm really visual thinker. So when you said that, I thought about a seed being sown into the ground. It's like we sow that seed into the ground and we don't expect to wake up the next morning, we got this big tree or this full of fruit or whatever. We know that it takes time. The crazy thing about it, you see the vision, you see the big picture. And I think the hardest thing for a visionary or founder is when you see the big picture, you still got to put the seed in the ground. And for example, oak tree, it takes 20 years.
I was going to say, that's decades. Exactly.
And
I love that visual. I love that visual. That's so right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when we watch that seed and we watch that tree, we're so patient with it.
Yeah.
We're like, we know it's going to take a time to sprout. You got to give it some water. You got to give it to whatever. But when it applies to ourselves, you lose that.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, right, how do you practice that exercise and not doing that, right? Because all seeds need time to grow. That's right. I love that. I love that visual.
And I think that's really good. It's something for all of us. We have that passion. And passion, it's a good and it's a bad. I mean, it's like it's a pro and a con.
It can be exhausting,
like,
right? Yes.
And a mistake we make is probably not lining it out and lining out the years. Like, okay, year one, this is what I'm gonna do. Year two, this is what. Year five, this is what I expect. Year 10, through the years of NeighborShare, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 years from now?
That's interesting. I'll paint you the broad vision first. Like I'll give you the tree first, and then we can figure out the pieces to it. Because I'm probably making, it's sort of like it's so funny that you're saying that thing. Like I think our ultimate vision is really for the NeighborShare model to be making impact all across the country, right? Because like the type of need we're talking about, what we're here to help with, they certainly exist in all walks of life, and like we know they exist in all corners of America, right? And so like the really big vision, the tree that we'd love to find is sort of like, I love to grow, is like this really vision of like, it's like this like tightly knit peer-to-peer safety net almost that we're basically creating for each other as neighbors, right? Like how do we build this movement nationally so that we're just lending each other just like a quick helping hand, right? Because like the needs we're here to support, right? They're $400 or below. Oftentimes it needs to come to us, it's like $100, $200. Like these aren't insurmountable things. And with sort of like each other's help, we can certainly get through them. And then, your question of like where do you see 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now? It's so interesting because that's sort of like the literally active debate I've been having with my board. We're about like a bit over a year in, and, and that means in the growing of the tree, like we're still very early on, right? Where there's sort of like this open-mindedness to just like, there's like just lots of different ways where this can literally manifest, right, through the years. And I would say that we're, actively in the process of figuring that out. And I think the interesting thing for us at a strategic level that we're still sorting through is like, look, like I don't think I or my board or our team, like we didn't start building NeighborShare with this sort of like ambition or desire to necessarily make NeighborShare itself famous. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's sort of like, who cares? Like the thing that we really care about is more like the impact, right? Like we really believe in the model and the nuances and logic of the model. So
Absolutely.
how do we sort of find sort of like the most efficient way to get that out there?
Yeah.
So is that via building ourselves? Is that via sort of, really fantastic partnerships, the strategic partners with bigger distribution and better capabilities, and maybe sort of like, so it's sort of like, I don't know, 10 years from now, what you'll see is like not necessarily the NeighborShare name, but is it like, hey, I know this model. Diane and I talked about that 10 years ago, and it's happening, right? That's the thing I more care about. And so I know I'm not giving you the tangible answers of 1, 3, 5, 10, because I think it's like literally shifting every other week as we're going through it. But those are some of the levers that we're exploring in terms of the like, look, if our fundamental mission, like the most important metric we can possibly produce is how many people are we helping, then it's sort of like the, hey, being really open-minded and creative about what's the best way to get there, right? And sorting that through.
If you can go back to January 2020, what do you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Oh, what a great question. I think there are a couple of things that go through mind. I think, because like as I reflect on January 2020, like so much has already happened, right? In the less than 2 years that we're talking about. And so I quite frankly wish I knew like what I know of myself now,
Mm.
right? Like sort of like that courage that I found, the sort of like grit that I found in myself, all of that sort of like, just like at that point, carrying that level of confidence I have in myself now, because I think that's like a powerful thing, right? I think that's sort of like going to help me unlock and become a better and better executive and leader of NeighborShare and other things through time and whatever else. I think there's that part. I think the other part is, and like, I mean, unfortunately, we're still not through it yet. I mean, like, I think there is also the part of like having some sense of knowing what we in the world and our communities were about to go through, right? Just through this pandemic and sort of like the different ways of it, the different challenges of it and whatever it is. And it's almost like knowing that that was about to happen so that I would also just deeply embrace and appreciate the old normal that we had. Right? Because in a lot of ways, I don't know that we're going to ever return back to that old normal. We'll go into new versions of normal. And so I think for myself, even like I was reflecting on it this morning, like I think there are parts of me that are still mourning that, right? Like I'm mourning the old normal as I come to the deeper and deeper realization that like we won't have our old normal back ever, probably. Right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think about myself. And one of the things, I mean, of course, I mean, not, trying to glorify COVID because people lost their lives and people are still losing family, people are sick right now in the hospital. But I thought about those things with me. I remember before COVID happened, it was kind of you living life in this routine. I mean, life just kind of happened. It's like, I know what's going to do. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to eat breakfast, I'm going to do this. I mean, just going on and on for years and years. But COVID changed everything. What COVID did for me, it put me in the mindset to always shift and change. And I've been shifting ever since I've been shifting. And I want you to give your take on that, as in the shift, because things changing, laws are changing, rules are changing, and things are just changing every day. And really, it's like, we have no idea what next month is going to be. I mean, the airports can be shut down again. I mean, things can be told. We have no idea. We that world is not existing right now. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think you're spot on. I think that's right? Where we sort of as a community and as a society, we've been going through an unprecedented series of shifts. And then to your point, the interesting dynamic is that, and it doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon.
Absolutely.
So like the thing that I've been trying to find my center on almost, right, is sort of like how do we embrace that change and not feel as much like the destabilization from it? Sort of like when there's change, but it's expected change, then it's still within your expectations, right? So how do I do that in a way where it's sort of like we're better equipped to almost like go with that flow because it's sort of like the change was expected versus I know to your point in the beginning, I was like holding on to this, like it just felt like a much harsher shift. Right? Like, wait a minute, I'm still trying to hold on to the old and like, wait, but you're like, I already need to go to the new. And by the time I adjust the new, the new news already happened. And like, that was very destabilizing and exhausting and scary, right? Versus the like embracing that, hey, this is what's going to happen. And then I think the other thing as part of maintaining perspective is also just like keeping our eyes open for like the good change that's happening. right? Sort of like in a lot of these shifts or whatever, it's like progress. Like when there's rules or laws that are being changed, or, or it's sort of like I don't know, if the airport gets shut down again, it's like, okay, but if that's for the safety of our community, like, okay, like I got that. I can understand the logic of that, right? And so it's sort of like, how do I also a little bit see the bright side of things? So it's not this constant frustration with change versus the embracing of change, because then I think that then puts ourselves in the position to almost like take better advantage of it, right? How do we then take advantage of that change to also then catapult progress for ourselves and our goals and missions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, Diana, this has been an amazing interview. I'm telling you.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for that. And then Cedric, like, I truly don't believe like us meeting each other, it's not random, and so like I truly believe in that. And so anyways, yeah, like in different ways, if we continue the conversation, whatever else, I'd love to do that. I love what you're doing with Lead to Greatness. And then, once again, just thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Thank you. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so, to check out more about NeighborShare and the important mission we're building toward, please check us out at nbshare.org. And then for folks who are interested in continuing conversation with me, because I'd love to meet folks who where this conversation might have sparked an interest, please just email me at Diana, Diana, at nbshare.org.
Awesome. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to personally thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Take care.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And if this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.